Perhaps you've heard of the adage, no margin, no mission, or you might hear no money, no mission. Basically, it comes down to saying the same thing. We need money to operate, to do what we want to do. Now, in healthcare, it's a very important mission. Perhaps the most important mission of any human endeavor is to take care of others in their time of need. But again, you must be a profitable enterprise to continue with that mission, whether you're not for profit or a nonprofit, which is the same thing, or a profit organization. So understanding profit and pricing are very important skills for any manager to have at least a fundamental knowledge of. Now, today we're going to be going over 4 scenarios, kind of work through some problems based in profit and pricing. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at today is operating margin. We are also going to revisit our old friend ROI, then also look at marginal revenue, and then we'll end with maximizing profit. So let's get started and look at some of these problems and concepts in a little bit more detail. Let's begin our discussion with operating margin. Formal definition of operating margin is a measure of what portion of a company's revenue is left after paying for variable costs. That could be wages, input materials, raw materials, etc. Another way to think about it, kind of putting it in our own personal terms, is for every dollar that you make, how much of that do you actually get to keep? We all know that what we make, we don't fully keep. We have, not only do we have taxes and all hosts of other expenses by the end of the time we get through with our paycheck. So let's calculate what an operating margin would be. Let's look at an example here. So for example, you have a clinic that has revenues of $2 million and costs of $1.8 million. What is its operating margin? Operating margin is profit over revenue, and make sure that you understand the difference between the two. Profit, again, is kind of what we get to keep after it's all said and done. Revenue is our gross, or what we've made. So if we make $15 an hour at our jobs, again, by the end of the day or the end of the pay period, after you have your bills and whatnot, you don't keep that full $15 an hour. So let's calculate it for this clinic scenario. Okay, so we've got to figure out what the profit is. That's not given here in this particular scenario. So we have $2 million in revenue. We know the costs, so that's going to be very easy. Just take the $2 million minus the $1.8 million in costs over the revenue. Again, we know the revenue is $2 million. That simplifies down to 200,000. So we've made 200,000 after it's all said and done on a total revenue of 2 million. So again, the 200,000 divided by the 2 million equals 0.10, or 10%. So again, an easy way to think of it, in this case, this clinic makes 10 cents on every dollar that it takes in as revenue. As far as maybe just I guess if you think about it, in comparison to other companies, healthcare has very thin operating margins. It's very, very narrow corridor they have to hit. Also, the grocery store business is the same way. Successful retailers like Walmart are able to be as successful as they are because of tremendous scale and economy. So also, I think we do see this in healthcare. It's been happening all around. This consolidation happens where I'm currently working at. Even though we are a huge health system in the Midwest and the 4th largest employer in Ohio, we have had kind of divisional areas. Those divisional areas are now going away, and we're going more unified, again, trying to get economy of scale in there because, again, our operating margins are so narrow. Take, for example, though, a company like Apple Computer. They have enjoyed, at least recently, very plump, very generous operating margins. Their operating margins are like 28%. So that kind of gives you an idea. But typically for healthcare, you're going to find something in the low single or the low double digits, if not single digits. Okay, now let's look at return on investment, kind of bringing back our old friend. I think we know conceptually what return on investment is. Let's look at it in a problem. So we have a lab that costs $8 million. It had revenues of $5 million and costs of $4 million. So what is the return on investment? Going back to that formula that we had earlier, ROI is simply kind of the profit over the investment. And we have to figure out what the profit is. We've got a couple of numbers here that will help us do that. We know that there was $5 million in revenues and $4 million in costs. The difference of that will be the profit. So we have to set it up with this particular formula, set up with the $5 million minus the $4 million. Kind of easy math here. You know it's $1 million over the total cost of this lab, which is $8 million. So you get $1 million over $8 million, which equals, when you do the division, 1.25, and that is equivalent to a 12.5% return on investment. So pretty good. Again, kind of comparing with other industries, Apple Computer does have return on investment typically in the mid-20s. Healthcare, again, we're looking at smaller numbers than in other higher margin, higher return on investment companies. So, but just some kind of comparison there. All right, now let's look at marginal revenue. This can be a very complex topic, but we're going to look at it in a very simplified form. When you look at just the basic definition of marginal revenue, it's the revenue from selling an additional unit of whatever. I mean, it could be an additional clinic visit, it could be an additional amount of pharmaceuticals, anything. So what is that revenue from selling that additional unit of output? Know that marginal revenue can be different at different parts of, as you have like different pricing going on. But in this case, what we're looking at is, at that last unit of sales, what is that marginal revenue? So let's look at it with a problem. Okay, so we have an average and marginal cost of $300, so that's given. You charge $500, let's say for patient visits, and serve 1,000 customers or patients. And you have a deal on the table, and that deal is, hey, you want to sell 200 more, patient visits to an HMO? We'll do it, but you got to agree upon a price of $450. So you got to think about this question, hey, this sounds great. Should I do it? Well, not necessarily. You really have to look at the numbers. If anything, if you go away with anything from this particular module, one of the key concepts is discounting and increased sales aren't always the best thing. You can actually lose a tremendous amount of money, even though you're bringing in double the amount of business, if you do not manage your discounts or your pricing strategy correctly. So tuck that away in the back of your mind and keep that with you kind of forever as you go through your professional career. All right, so we want to look at this. Is this a good deal or not? Well, what is your marginal revenue? This particular question is set up very easily. We know that the marginal revenue on those last 200 units that you're being offered is already given. It's $450. So you know your marginal revenue is $450 for that additional unit of clinic served or patient served. So what is the marginal revenue? Is it more than the marginal costs? Well, again, marginal revenue is more than marginal costs. So that does look good. And then the last question is, will you be willing, should you do this deal, will you be making money if you do the HMO proposition? And yes, I mean, your marginal revenues are more than your marginal costs. So yes, it would be a good idea to go ahead and take this deal. It will increase your overall profits. Okay, now let's look at maximizing profits. This is kind of magical here. It is being able to determine what price is going to get you to that sweet spot where you are making as much money as possible. And with that, you're going to have to factor in elasticity of demand as well. So you'll see that there's going to be somewhat of a complicated formula here, but it's not too bad as long as you follow some very basic sequential steps. But when you come away with it, you're going to be able to know what price you really should be having. If you price any higher, you're actually going to start losing money. Even though you may have more visits or sell more of a drug or sell more widgets or more of a medical device, you will actually start losing money. And if you sell at any higher a price, again, same thing. You're going to drive away business. You're not going to make quite as much money. So what is that magical price? Okay, so let's look at this. We have a situation where you know your marginal cost is $10 and you face an elasticity of -5. So that's that elasticity of demand. To maximize profits, you should choose a price of what? Well, I'm going to call it the profit maximizing price. We'll call it the PMP. The book doesn't really call it abbreviated as PMP, but they do call it profit maximizing price. So let's say we have this formula, which is the elasticity divided by 1 plus the elasticity, come up with an answer, then multiply that times your marginal cost. So as long as you're careful about the order of operations, we're only dealing with ones and pluses and one multiplication, you should be okay. So let's set up this formula. All right, so profit maximizing price. We know our elasticity is -5 over 1 plus -5. And that's going to again be multiplied times the marginal cost, which we know is 10. Let's simplify even further. So we still have that 5 divided by -4, because 1 plus -5 is -4. And that'll be multiplied times 10. Okay, so close out that fraction. And -5 divided by -4. You have two negatives, so it's going to be a positive, which is great. Makes it nice and easy. You have a positive 1.25. Multiply that times 10, and this is where the magic happens. You know your price. You should be pricing your hospital visit, your drug, your whatever you're doing, your unit of production. You should be pricing it at $12.50 to maximize profits. Any less, you're going to hurt yourself. Any more, you're going to hurt yourself. So kind of a very powerful tool. So let's look at another example with the profit maximizing price. We have our marginal cost, $10. You face an elasticity now of -3. To maximize profits, you should choose a price of what? Again, we have our formula. Just be careful, plug and chug, and you'll be absolutely fine. We have -3 over 1 plus -3 times 10. Condense that down even further. That fraction now becomes a -3 divided by a -2 times 10. Plug it into any calculator or do it in your head. You have now 1.5 times 10. And again, the magic happens. You know that after you collapse this formula down and simplify it, you have $15 should be your profit maximizing price. Again, over the years, I'm sure you'll forget the formula, but if you understand or know that there is a concept out there that economists, that people that are working with the strategies with your organization, maybe someday that is you, that there are tools available for you to be able to determine what we should be doing, what we should be making our price at. Now, I will say, and the book brings this up as well, the devil is in the details, and probably the biggest detail here is coming up with that elasticity of demand and having that be accurate. But let's say, again, you have some pretty solid information. You are able to determine what you should be pricing your products at rather than just winging it. Okay, let's do one more scenario on maximizing profits. In this case, we have a marginal cost of $100 and your elasticity is a -3. You currently charge $150 for, let's say, a clinic visit. But you want to know if increasing that clinic visit, or whatever it might be, to $175 should increase profits. Is that going to be true or false? Now, your knee-jerk reaction might be, yeah, it is going to increase profits. I'm charging more, I'm going to make more. Yeah, I understand demand a little bit, and I understand that I'm going to lose a few customers, but overall, I think I will be okay. Well, that may not be true. Let's first find out what your profit maximizing price is to see if this is actually true or not. Remember the formula. We're going to plug in our elasticity of demand, which is -3, and our marginal cost, which is 100. We're going to work through that formula, again simplifying it, coming up with a 1.5 times 100, and we get $150. So we know that our profit maximizing price is $150, which coincidentally is already what we currently are charging. So if we decide to go ahead and increase our price, we are actually going to decrease profits. So in this particular scenario, it is false. You would not want to go to the 175. You would want to pretty much stick to your guns at 150 to increase your profits to the maximum potential that they could have. So the point of today and going through these various examples with operating margin, ROI, marginal revenue, and maximizing profits is, one, give you some hands-on experience with actually running through a few numbers and coming up with these answers. But I guess the bigger takeaway is for you to understand that there are tools out there for economists, for people that are in finance departments within organizations, to come up with solid numbers, as far as, rather than just winging it. Oh, what should we charge? Well, let's start at this and see what happens. There's a much better approach that you can follow to come up with, again, solid numbers to give yourself a very good foundation on what to do, so especially with pricing. So know that these tools exist, and maybe someday you might actually be using them, and or even further, you may be actually calculating them. But as a healthcare manager or administrator, you're definitely going to be dealing with prices, and being able to know how those prices are determined is critical, and to question how those prices were determined. Unfortunately, in a lot of business environments, they do just wing it as far as trying to determine this. And you can bring forward solutions that could prove to be very beneficial to the organization by following some fundamental economic principles. So, again, a lot of information here today. Please take your time to work through some of these problems. Many of them will show up on a quiz or final in the future in various forms or another. And I hope this has been beneficial. And as always, thank you for watching.